From Brooke High School, WTRF proudly presents Ohio Valley Tonite with Nathan Marshall. Tonight's guest.
We are joined tonight by Carnegie Mellon University Professor of Rhetoric and Linguistics, Barbara Johnstone. Thank you so much for coming in. Appreciate it.
Pleasure to be here.
And Barbara is most of all known for being an expert in the dialect simply known as Pittsburghese. And Barbara, tell our viewers a little bit about what Pittsburghese is, because I'm sure there's people at home being like, shut up, listen to this lady, she's a professor on cheese or something. Tell us, what is Pittsburghese and why do people in Pittsburgh speak it?
Pittsburghese is a way of speaking that's associated with Pittsburgh. People think of it as a dialect. In the case of Pittsburgh, and actually all of Pennsylvania and West Virginia and elsewhere, the original English-speaking settlers were Scots-Irish. What that means is they, in many cases, the families had originally lived in Scotland, but then they were resettled in Northern Ireland, and a couple generations later they moved to the U.S. They moved to the central part of the what was then the 13 colonies, the Delaware Valley, Philadelphia, and then moved west from there. They had to move pretty far west because most of the land further east had been already taken by the Quakers who founded Pennsylvania, and then the Germans who'd been after them.
So you're telling me that Pittsburghese started because people wanted to get away from Quaker oats?
Well, you could say that.
Needed to get away from it, right?
Well, they had to get away because the good land, the Quakers had taken all the good land. They never, not very many Quakers ever came this far west.
Barbara, we're going to play a little bit of a game here.
Okay.
We like to play games, and we thought we'd play a game with you tonight. And we called this game,
What in the Nebby Stiller Field world is this feller talking about?
it's a mouthful.
Yeah, that is a mouthful. Okay, I hope you're not going to ask me to translate the whole
Oh,
thing.
gosh. Well, in this game, we're going to ask you to translate some things.
All right.
We're going to give you some examples of Pittsburghese. I'm going to do the best I can with it. As you can tell, I'm not the greatest at it. And you have to correctly guess what I'm saying. Are you up for this?
Okay, I'm up for it.
Okay. Here's our first one. This one's the easiest one, and it moves up in levels, I guess. The first one is, Yins are all the time jagging on me. These streets is full of potholes, and PennDOT ain't doing nothing about it.
Okay, you guys are always, or y'all are always teasing me or getting on my nerves.
Yeah.
These streets are full of potholes, and PennDOT is the Pennsylvania Department of Transportation is true to form, not doing anything about them.
That is very true. This is the truest Pittsburghese statement of all time.
Yep.
PennDOT sitting around talking about the pothole instead of fixing it. That's great. Why, in 2006, did the New York Times write an article that said that Pittsburgh was the Galapagos Island of American dialects? Why do you think that?
Partly for that same reason, because it was isolated and it had hung on, the Pittsburgh area had hung on to a way of speaking that was more different. Lots of reasons for that. One of was the mountains, as I said before, but another was that people tended to, even the aristocracy in Pittsburgh tended to marry in the city. They sent their kids to the same schools. Then thousands and thousands of immigrants came from Eastern Europe and Southern Europe to work in the steel mills, and they were too poor to move around very much, so nobody ever really got exposed to other ways of speaking.
Yeah.
So what's happening in general as people get more mobile and they start talking to people from other places is the differences kind of level out, kind of even out. And so these dialects associated with regions or sub-regions are really gradually disappearing, but in Pittsburgh it's still, the Scots-Irish influence is still quite strong. And another thing that's like the Galapagos Islands is that in the Galapagos Islands, new species developed because they were isolated for so long from the mainland.
I've actually met some people from Pittsburgh who would be considered a different type of species.
You think? They may think that people from West Virginia are a different type of species.
Hey, now. We wear our shoes. That's a stereotype.
And actually a new sound developed in Pittsburgh, and that is the sound that you hear in words like at and dan and has and downtown, which is really not very widespread and probably originated in Pittsburgh. Maybe when some immigrant group had trouble pronouncing the ow sound and started saying and it kind of caught on. We're not sure exactly why that happened.
All right, here's our second one. You got the first one right. You're one for one. Here's the second one. It's a little bit more difficult. Listen, Jens, I decided to take a break because I was getting really hungry. I looked into the fridge, but it needed stock. All I had was butter bread and leftover city chicken. No jumbo, no chipped ham, no kielbasa.
Okay, so it's something like, listen, you guys, I was getting hungry, so I went to the fridge, but it needed to be stocked, needed to be stocked. But all I had was some, what was the first thing?
Butter bread.
Butter bread, which is
Leftover city chicken.
buttered bread. So buttered bread is, in German, a piece of bread with butter on it is called Butterbrot, which means butter bread. And what they did was they just sort of took that whole word in German and just say it in English, so butter bread.
Oh, okay.
That's one of the things about, in sort of the Pittsburghese things that actually doesn't come from the Scots-Irish, but instead from German. And city chicken was a kind of, almost like a kind of shish kebab. It was inexpensive meat that was supposed to substitute for chicken.
Yeah.
And a lot of the foodstuffs are things that people who didn't have that much money would eat. Jumbo was a kind of bologna sausage, lunch meat. It was inexpensive. Bologna is one of the most inexpensive kinds of lunch meat, sandwich meat. And I think the reason people kind of hung on to that word, why they remember that word, is because it reminds them of steel workers and other industrial workers taking their lunch to work, and they would take a jumbo sandwich.
Yeah. And it's weird that bologna's not in the Pittsburghese dialect and jumbo is, because you think it'd be like, I need some bologna, you know.
Bologna.
Yeah. If you speak Pittsburghese, you probably don't even realize it, as we were talking about a little bit. What are some signs for our viewers at home to know if they're speaking Pittsburghese, and what are ways they can get rid of it, or should they even get rid of it at all?
Well, to answer the second question first, there are people, and I know one of them, who will help you lose your Pittsburgh accent if you want to. Some people do want to, people who get teased about it or who have jobs where it's really important to sound like a newscaster, like really standard.
Yeah. Of course, you don't want a broadcaster being like, listen, Jens, to this story. There was this guy down at Pants and that. That would be a terrible, terrible broadcaster.
Yeah, well, there used to be a weather caster, and the weather people and the sports people can always sound more like they're local, right?
Yeah.
No matter where you are, in Texas, the sports people will sound more Texas, and the news people will sound more standard. And
Yeah.
the same in Pittsburgh. There used to be a guy who did the weather and who always talked about showers for showers, and people really liked that, you know.
Yeah.
But it's actually more of a liability for women who are doing things like being teachers and receptionists and things, and who are sort of responsible for speaking in a standard way. I once heard a story about, and I don't know whether this is true or not, but it could be. Woman from Pittsburgh is somewhere else on vacation to like Myrtle Beach, which Pittsburghers go to Myrtle Beach for vacation. And they walk into a store and say something, and someone says, "Oh, you're from Pittsburgh," or "Are you from Pittsburgh?" And they say things like, "Well, I didn't say Yins. I didn't say downtown. How do they know?" And all the woman had to say was "non." And the woman said, "You're from Pittsburgh." So the way she said that one syllable, non instead of non, for non-smoking.
Didn't help that she had a Steeler jersey on, huh?
Probably.
This is the last one, so here we go. This is the most difficult one. I'm going to read through it, and you tell us what this means. This is a difficult one. I headed out to the store. I got me a buggy and picked up a hoagie, some pop, a dozen eggs in case I wanted dippy ones in the morning. When I got back home, I headed out by the creek to eat in peace and quiet. Just as I was going to take a bite of my sandwich, my nebby neighbor Cheryl shows up, wanting to know how I've been.
Okay.
A lot of facial
There you
features
go.
in that,
yeah.
too.
There you go.
That's a lot out of you. What does that mean?
So a hoagie is like a submarine sandwich.
Yeah.
It's the word that's used in Pennsylvania. I think it was the word that comes from Philadelphia originally.
Hoagies and grinders, navy beans.
Yeah.
Adam Sandler quote.
Dippy eggs are eggs that you can dip your bread or toast into, probably real runny, sunny side up eggs.
Okay.
Dippy is also a dinosaur outside the Carnegie Museum of Art and Natural History.
Named after the eggs?
No.
What's a nebby neighbor?
A nebby neighbor is a nosy neighbor, and a neb is an animal's nose or a snout. So now we use the word snout for an animal.
Yeah.
But they used to use the word neb. So when somebody says she's such a neb nose, it really is like she's double nosy.
Yeah, so next time you tell someone, you're nosy,
Yeah.
snouty nosy, all those things. All right, we have a student question here from a senior at Brooke High School, Shannon Reardon, and Shannon has this to say.
What do you do as a professor of rhetoric and linguistics at Carnegie Mellon, and how do you receive a degree like that?
That's a very interesting question.
Yeah, well, I, as a professor of rhetoric and linguistics, I teach courses about language. These include courses, writing courses, courses for people who are studying to be professional writers or technical writers or sometimes creative writers. To become a professor, you need to get a PhD, which is a degree that you get after you get your master's degree. Usually the master's degree takes 1 or 2 years. A PhD takes 5, 6, 7 years.
Yeah. As a professor of linguistics, is there any punctuation mark that you get so angry at or anything to that effect?
And this is my big pet peeve. You know, everybody has their one pet peeve. Mine is punctuating the word ITS, whether it's IT apostrophe S or not. And, you know, that just like makes me see red because it's so simple to get it right. The rule is so simple. And yet I catch myself doing it wrong sometimes.
Wow.
I mean, I'm really glad I caught it. I wonder how many times I didn't catch it.
I could just imagine you sitting at home being like, I can't believe I spelled it wrong.
Oh, I know. Sometimes I get it wrong myself. It's so
Marking
embarrassing.
red marks all over your arms. No. Again, I want to thank my guest today, Barbara Johnstone, who is a professor of rhetoric and linguistics at Carnegie Mellon University. Thank you so much, Barbara. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
And you can learn more information on Barbara, Carnegie Mellon, or Pittsburghese by visiting.
Well, for Pittsburghese, you can go to the Pittsburgh Speech and Society website. All you have to do is just Google in Pittsburgh Speech, and it'll be the thing that comes up. Very big website with all sorts of stuff, including some podcasts and references and everything. Find out more about me by Googling my name, and you'll come up with my personal website.
Great. Google it up, everybody.
Yeah.
That'd be great. And for Ohio Valley Tonight, this has been Nathan Marshall.
Because the Pittsburghers haven't been able to get rid of them.
And that's why they need to bring abuse back to schools.
I don't think so.
I'm completely kidding. I'm completely kidding.